October 30th, Monday. We saw the Library of Saint Germain, a very noble collection. Codex Devonorum Officiorum, 1459. A letter square like that of the offices, perhaps the same. The Codex by Fustin Gernsheim. Mercius, 12-volume folio. Amadis in French, 3-volume folio. Catholicon sine colophon, but of 1460. Two other editions. One by Augustin de Civate Dei, without name, date, or place, but of Fust's square letter as it seems. I dined with Colonel Drumgold, had a pleasing afternoon. Some of the books of St. Germain stand in presses from the wall, like those at Oxford. Footnote here from Boswell about two other editions. I have looked in vain into De Bure, Meerman, Metayer, and other typographical books for the two editions of the Catholicon which Dr. Johnson mentions here, with names which I cannot make out. I read one by Latinus, or Lathomy, one by Bodinus, or Badius. I have deposited the original manuscript in the British Museum, where the curious may see it. My grateful acknowledgments are due to Mr. Planta for the trouble he was pleased to take in aiding my researches. October 31st, that would be Halloween for us. Tuesday. It was so remember, Tuesday, October 31st, Halloween, 1775. That was a Tuesday, it was a Halloween. I lived at the Benedictines. Meager day, soup meager, herrings, eels, both with sauce, fried fish, lentils, tasteless in themselves. In the library, where I found Mafus de Historia Indica, Promontorium Fictere to Doble the Cape, or something like that. I parted very tenderly from the prior and Friar Wilkes. Maitre es Arts 2 years, or 2Y, I'm not sure what that stands for. Bach Theology, I'm guessing, 3Y. La Scientia 2Y. Doctor Theology 2 years. Oh, okay. So these are, let me read this again. Maître d'Arts, so that would be Master of Arts 2 years. Bachelor of Theology 3 years. Licentiate, I don't know what that is. Licentiate. Maybe it's just license. 2 years. Doctor of Theology 2 years. In all, 9 years. For the doctorate, 3 disputations, major, minor, Sorbonica. We don't have Sorbonica anymore, as far as I know. Several colleges suppressed and transferred to that which was the Jesuits' college. November 1st, Wednesday, we left Paris. Saint Denis, a large town. The church not very large, but the middle aisle is very lofty and awful. AWEFUL. On the left, in our chapels built beyond the line of the wall, which destroy the symmetry of the sides. The organ is higher above the pavement than any I have ever seen. The gates are of brass. On the middle gate is the history of our Lord. The painted windows are historical and said to be eminently beautiful. We were at another church belonging to a convent, of which the portal is a dome. We could not enter further, and it was almost dark. November 2nd, Thursday. We came this day to Chantilly. Chantilly-les, a seat belonging to the Prince of Condé. This place is eminently beautiful by all varieties of waters, starting up in fountains, falling in cascades, running in streams, and spread in lakes. The water seems to be too near the house. All this water is brought from a source or river 3 leagues off by an artificial canal, which for 1 league is carried underground. The house is magnificent. The cabinet seems well stocked. What I remember was the jaws of a hippopotamus and a young hippopotamus preserved, which, however, is so small that I doubt its reality. It seems too hairy for an abortion and too small for a mature birth. Nothing was in spirits, all was dry. The dog, the deer, the ant-bear with long snout, the toucan, spelled here Toucan. I'm not sure if that's how you spell it now. Long, broad beak. The stables were of very great length, but the kennel had no sense. There was a mockery of a village. The menagerie had a few animals, 2 faussons, or Brazilian weasels, spotted, very wild. There is a forest and, I think, a park. I walked till I was very weary, and next morning felt my feet battered and with pains in the toes. There's a footnote here about the menagerie having a few animals as well as 2 faussons, Faussans. These are from Boswell. The writing is so bad here, I think it means the handwriting is illegible, that the names of several of the animals cannot be deciphered without much more acquaintance with natural history than I possess. Dr. Blagden, with his usual politeness, most obligingly examined the manuscript. To that gentleman and to Dr. Gray of the British Museum, who also very readily assisted me, I beg leave to express my best thanks. It is thus written by Johnson from the French pronunciation of Faussain. This is for faussons. It should be observed that the person who showed this menagerie was mistaken in supposing the fausson and the Brazilian weasel to be the same, the fausson being a different animal and a native of Madagascar. I find them, however, upon one plate in Pennett's Synopsis of Quadrupeds. Well, I've never heard of this animal, the fausson. I'll have to look that up. November 3rd, Friday, we came to Compiègne, a very large town with a royal palace built round a pentagonal court. The court is raised upon vaults and has, I suppose, an entry on one side by a gentle rise. Talk of painting. The church is not very large, but very elegant and splendid. I had at first great difficulty to walk, but motion grew continually easier. At night we came to Noyon, an episcopal city. The cathedral is very beautiful, the pillars alternately Gothic and Corinthian. We entered a very noble parochial church. Noyon is walled and is said to be 3 miles round. November 4th, Saturday. We rose very early and came through St. Quentin to Cambrai, not long after 3. We went to an English nunnery to give a letter to Father Welch, the confessor, who came to visit us in the evening. November 5, Sunday. We saw the cathedral. It is very beautiful, with chapels on each side. The choir is splendid, the balustrade in one part brass. The nef very high and grand. The altar silver as far as it seems. As it is seen, rather. The vestments very splendid. At the Benedictine church... Cuts off. This is Boswell now. Here his journal ends abruptly. Footnote here. My worthy and ingenious friend, Mr. Andrew Lubinson, by his accurate acquaintance with France, enabled me to make out many proper names which Dr. Johnson had written indistinctly and sometimes spelt erroneously. It's good to know that Johnson can't spell either, especially since he wrote a dictionary. I can't spell for hell. Whether he wrote any more after this time I know not, but probably not much, as he arrived in England around about the 12th of November. These short notes of his tour, though they may seem minute, taken singly, make together a considerable mass of information, and exhibit such an ardor of inquiry and acuteness of examination as, I believe, are found in but a few travelers, especially at an advanced age. Remember, he's 66 here, which I imagine is pretty old in 1700s, late 1700s times. They completely refute the idle notion which has been propagated that he could not see, and if he had taken the trouble to revise and digest them, he undoubtedly could have expanded them into a very entertaining narrative. I should also mention that Johnson lives to be, 75 or so. So, he's still got 9 more years left in him, and many, many pages. When I met him in London the following year, the account which he gave me of the French tour was, quote, Sir, I have seen all the visibilities of Paris and around it, but to have formed an acquaintance with the people there would have required more time than I could stay. I was just beginning to creep into acquaintance by means of Colonel Drumgold, a very high man, sir, head of l'École Militaire, a most complete character, for he had been first a professor of rhetoric, and then become a soldier. And, sir, I was very kindly treated by the English Benedictines, and have a cell appropriated to me in their convent. He observed, quote, "The great in France live very magnificently, but the rest very miserably. There is no happy middle state as in England. The shops of Paris are mean. The meat in the markets is such as would be sent to a Gaul in England." Gaol, Gaul. And Mr. Thrale justly observed that the cookery of the French was forced upon them by necessity, for they could not eat their meat unless they added some taste to it. I guess the good cooking comes after the French Revolution. The French are an indelicate people. They will spit upon any place. At Madame Blank's, it says here that's Madame de Bocage, in a footnote, a literary lady of rank, the footman took the sugar in his fingers and threw it into my coffee. That is kind of gross. I was going to put it aside, but hearing it was made on purpose for me, I Ian tasted Tom's fingers. I guess that means I even tasted Tom's fingers. The same lady would need make tea à la Anglaise. English. The sprout of the teapot did not pour freely. She bade the footman blow into it. France is worse than Scotland in everything but climate. Nature has done more for the French, but they have done less for themselves than the Scotch have done. Well, he really doesn't like the French. It happened that Foote was at Paris at the same time with Dr. Johnson, and his description of my friend while there was abundantly ludicrous. He told me that the French were quite astonished at his figure and manner, and at his dress, which he obstinately continued exactly as in London. His brown clothes, black stockings, and plain shirt. He mentioned that an Irish gentleman, footnote here tells us this is perhaps Captain Kilpatrick, said to Johnson, "Sir, you have not seen the best French players." Johnson replied, "Players, sir. I took on them as no better than creatures set upon tables and joint stools to make faces and produce laughter, like dancing dogs." "But, sir, you will allow that some players are better than others." Johnson replied, "Yes, sir, as some dogs dance better than others." While Johnson was in France, he was generally very resolute in speaking Latin. It was a maxim with him that a man should not let himself down by speaking a language which he speaks imperfectly. Indeed, we must have often observed how inferior, how much like a child, a man appears who speaks a broken tongue. When Sir Joshua Reynolds, at one of the dinners of the Royal Academy, presented him to a Frenchman, says here, footnote, probably the French ambassador, of great distinction, he would not deign to speak French, but talked Latin, though his Excellency did not understand it, owing perhaps to it being a dead language. Owing perhaps to Johnson's English pronunciation, is what it says here. Yet upon another occasion he was observed to speak French to a Frenchman of high rank who spoke English, and being asked the reason with some expression of surprise, Johnson answered, "Because I think my French is as good as his English." Though Johnson understood French perfectly, he could not speak it readily, as I have observed at his first interview with General Paoli in 1769. Yet he wrote it, I imagine, pretty well, as appears from some of his letters in Mrs. Piozzi's collection, of which I shall transcribe one. Oh, shit. So now we have something here in French. And there's no translation, so yet again I'm going to have to look it up later, and I'll put it in the comments, because we must know what it says. I can just read Oui Madame. Well, maybe I can translate. Let's just for shits and giggles, let me try and translate this. Madame la Comtesse de Blanc, July 16, 1775. It says here in a footnote, Madame de Boufflers, the original is dated May 16, 1776. Oui Madame, le moment est arrivé. So that means, yes, Madame, the moment has arrived. Okay, I don't remember. I don't get the rest of this. So I'll just post it later. Back to Boswell. Here let me not forget a curious anecdote as related to me by Mr. Beauclerk, which I shall endeavour to exhibit as well as I can in that gentleman's lively manner. And in justice to him it is proper to add that Dr. Johnson told me I might rely both on the correctness of his memory and the fidelity of his narrative. Quote, when Madame de Beaufleurs was first in England, said Beauclerk, she was desirous to see Johnson. I accordingly went with her to his chambers at the Temple, where she was entertained with his conversation for some time. When our visit was over, she and I left him, and we were got into Inner Temple Lane, when all at once I heard a noise like thunder. This was occasioned by Johnson, who, it seems, upon a little recollection, had taken it into his head that he ought to have done the honours of his literary residence to a foreign lady of quality, and eager to show himself a man of gallantry, was hurrying down the staircase in violent agitation. He overtook us before we reached the Temple gate, and brushing between me and Madame de Beaufleurs, seized her hand and conducted her to her couch. His dress was a rusty brown morning suit, a pair of old shoes by way of slippers, a little shriveled wig sticking on the top of his head, and the sleeves of his shirt and the knees of his breeches hanging loose. A considerable crowd of people gathered round, and were not a little struck by this singular appearance. Johnson spoke Latin with wonderful fluency and elegance. When Pierre Boscovich was in England, Johnson dined in company with him at Sir Joshua Reynolds's, and at Dr. Douglas's, now Bishop of Salisbury. Upon both occasions, that celebrated foreigner expressed his astonishment at Johnson's Latin conversation. When at Paris, Johnson thus characterized Voltaire to Freron, the journalist, as vir est assertime ingenii et pocerum literarum, or a man of very acute intellect and little literature. Well, we have time for one letter here. To Dr. Samuel Johnson, Edinburgh, December 5th, 1775. My dear sir, Mr. Alexander Maclean, the present young Laird of Cole, being to set out tomorrow for London, I give him this letter to introduce him to your acquaintance. The kindness which you and I experienced from his brother, whose unfortunate death we sincerely lament, will make us always desirous to show attention to any branch of the family. I wonder if that's the guy who died in the boat before. Indeed, you have so much of the true Highland cordiality that I am sure you would have thought me to blame if I had neglected to recommend to you this Hebridean prince, in whose island we were hospitably entertained. I ever am, with respectful attachment, my dear sir, your most obliged and most humble servant, James Boswell. Mr. Maclean returned with the most agreeable accounts of the polite attention with which he was received by Dr. Johnson. In the course of this year, Dr. Burney informs me that, quote, he very frequently met Dr. Johnson at Mr. Thrale's at Streatham, where they had many long conversations, often sitting up as long as the fire and candles lasted, and much longer than the patience of the servants subsisted. Oh, and then tomorrow we're going to get some sayings, but I'm going to hold that off till tomorrow. Get some good Johnson adages, so be sure to pay attention and write those down. Till next time, bye from Boswell.